welcome everyone here tonight, and I would especially like to thank Zali for coming here in person and her team. And what makes me think that Zali actually has what it takes to win the seat of Warringah? And can she win against the incumbent? One that has the backing of powerful lobby groups and an established and well-funded party machine. Well, I believe she can, and I believe that I'm backing a winner. So Zali's a woman whose focus and determination won her an Olympic medal and world championships in skiing. A woman whose incredible stamina is demonstrated by her, incredibly, being a 100-kilometre marathon runner, something I didn't even know existed. A woman whose intelligence and power of reasoning saw her move into a career as a lawyer and then as a successful barrister. And a woman with the highest level of integrity and ethics, chosen to serve on international sporting committees. And right now, she's the person who's stepped up to represent Warringah and to serve her country when I believe she's needed most. And this is the first time I've personally been involved in politics in any shape or form. And I'm passionate to do so right now because living in this electorate at this time, I have what I believe is a unique opportunity. And in fact, it's more than an opportunity. I actually feel it's my responsibility. And it's my responsibility to do my part to try and stop the lurch to the right and the destructive forces that have damaged our political system and weakened our democracy. And I believe in a future where our politicians take climate change seriously, where economic growth is strong and sustainable, and where respectful debate and collaboration have a place in politics. And having worked overseas for many years, I've been acutely aware of the great privilege that we have in Australia when we cast our vote. And the vote I cast next month, I do so with the greatest burden of responsibility. And like many in this electorate, I've been let down by the current member, who's failed to represent us for too long, who's forgotten that his day job as a member of the House of Representatives, the job he's paid to do, is to represent us. And his blatant disregard for our views during the same-sex marriage vote was frankly nothing short of a sackable offence. But this isn't a campaign to focus on the negatives, it's actually about the positives. And I'm going to be handing over to Lindy in a moment to do a Q&A with Zali. But I'm going to leave you with a quote from Zali, and I may well be misquoting you here, so I apologise. But I believe you said, I believe that you said after winning a medal or some fabulous thing, when you were asked if it was the highlight of your life, you said something like, I hope I haven't had the highlight yet. Okay, good. And Zali, for all our sakes, we hope that there's a highlight on the horizon for you. So welcome and thank you very much.
Up on stage. Well, this is certainly a highlight for me, Zali. I'm Lindy Hewson, a good friend of Bernie's and a staunch Zali supporter, but I'll try and stay neutral here. So Zali, one day a while ago, you hit your personal tipping point and you woke up and decided to run for Warringah. Can you tell us why?
Yes. Well, look, it's one of those things that I think, for many people, it's that gradually cumulative process where one issue after the next maybe incensed you a little bit more than the one before. I think I am a moderate Liberal. I'm very happy with Gladys and the Liberal Party when it comes to the state election and our state government. I've always been slightly at odds with our federal member, though. I turned 18 in 1992, and he's been the only member available from a Liberal point of view at federal elections. So I must say, and I know a lot has been made about this, but I'm always sort of, I think, posted a protest vote in this electorate because for me, he just didn't appeal to me. But what I've felt was I've been waiting to see, well, who's going to stand up? When are they going to pre-select somebody else? Just something a little bit more progressive in values and maybe more representative. So I was horrified with the same-sex marriage, that our views were completely ignored. I was very, very unhappy about the overturning, the loss of the loss of the Malcolm government, in the sense that it just seemed to be for nothing. We went through upheaval, great disruption, and then nothing really came out of it, other than actually losing the National Energy Guarantee, which was at least some form of regulation that was going to assist with climate change and setting a standard for energy. Then the complete lack of consideration of Julie Bishop as a leader just really reinforced to me how we have got to do better at female representation. I know things like knighting Prince Philip were just out there in the... they were just like the cherry on top of the cake in terms of what else could possibly happen. But so I got to the end of last year feeling like surely it is time for us to have another choice in Warringah. We have to be able to contribute something different to the national discourse, to the political landscape. And I must say, as a mother of teenagers, I was horrified at the standard of debate. When you see the footage of question time and the way the debate happens, we have to raise the bar. There has to be a level of truth, a level of integrity brought back into the debate. So at the end of last year, I looked at all those factors and I said, look, I feel that Warringah is ready for change. I need to offer a choice. This is a Conservative electorate. We are never going to be Labor. Green are completely dysfunctional. It is either Liberal or Independent in this electorate. I had no faith in the pre-selection system of the Liberal Party. So from my point, and it had already happened, I guess, by the time I really got galvanised. So for me, it was about offering Warringah a choice. And for me, it was about being independent and really providing a new direction and something more positive.
So for some people, they're feeling that a vote for an independent is a wasted vote. How would you counter that?
Well, I don't think so. I think a vote for an independent is your truest form of democracy, and it's a vote for Warringah, because at the end of the day, there is no conflict of interest. I am there to represent the people of Warringah. As a barrister, I am not there to represent my views to the court or to the judge. I'm there to represent the facts, the opinions of the experts, and put the best case forward I can on behalf of the client. I see a role as a representative as exactly the same thing. You're representing the electorate and the values and the views of the electorate to Parliament, and doing the best you can to debate and argue and ensure legislation that is the right way. Now, we've seen the strength of a strong independent crossbench. We saw that with the Medivac bill with Karen Phelps, and I think she always says it's not the balance of power, it's the power of balance. And what the independents on the crossbench do is they bring moderation and I think more collaboration to our style of government. The main parties are very polarised. They are very oppositional. Well, certainly they have been since 2009, and I think since Tony Abbott was leader of the coalition. And that has created a real dysfunction in our form of government. We're not advancing. We are in a combative style of government where each side takes, I think, shots at each other, and they do and undo each other's work, but we don't progress. And I appreciate there are always ideologies, but we have to be able to move forward on issues. There are bipartisan issues like climate change that need a collaborative approach, and for me, I think that's where the independents kick in.
So one of the sticking points, I think, or points of concern in this electorate certainly, is Labor's tax reform and the franking credits. Would you like to talk about that a little?
Yes, look, and I know my position in being squirmied around by the opposition, but no, I oppose those, and I've made a pledge that I definitely would oppose those changes in Parliament when it comes to negative gearing, franking credits. Especially, look, both sides with the budget and the budget in reply indicated they supported tax cuts to individuals and small businesses at lower income levels. I think that's a good thing. I support that. I support that we reduce our taxes and have a simpler system. I think we need a lower tax rate. We are a highly taxed at a very high tax rate, and I think that's very counterproductive for the economy. But we also need to simplify the deductions. It's a system that ultimately I think big corporate is better able to take advantage of than small to medium businesses. So I do oppose Shorten's measures in that sense. I don't oppose the small tax cuts to individuals. I support the Coalition's proposal of flattening our tax rates and simplifying it. But I certainly don't see the cherry picking that the Labor Party are doing as being the right way to go.
Okay, so we've touched on the tax side of things, but assuming a Labor government does come into power, what other Labor policies would you support?
Look, I do support their policy on climate change because we need some action. I don't, and I know this, it's not really enough though. The reality is the IPCC has told us that if we reduce our emissions by globally by 45% on our by 2030 on our 2005 levels, it's quite a mouthful when you start breaking it all down. But the reality is that gives us a 50-50 chance of staying under a 2-degree of warming world. Now, 2 degrees, we get to really dire situation and really dramatic consequences in terms of extreme weather events and heat and consequences. I don't think 50-50 is a good enough outcome. I think from when I look at my kids, I want to say that I'm trying something a little bit better than that. So I do support their policy in the sense that they are on board with some action. I am a little sceptical as to them carrying it out if in government. So we've all seen most major parties make a lot of promises before elections, and it's another story after the election. And I am, whilst I'm happy to see them make the position ahead, I would certainly be very focused on holding them to account to deliver on that progress and on that policy.
So in the interest of keeping the balance here, should there be a Liberal coalition government come in, what would you support there?
Well, I support their approach to tax cuts and certainly the fiscal policy. I support most of the policies. My biggest issue with the coalition is their lack of climate change policy and the lack of real position on energy. So much work had gone into last year to getting the NEG ready. It had bipartisan support. It had support from all the states. It had support from the business industry. I mean, it didn't get much better in terms of getting support to be able to get a mechanism in that could get started. It got torpedoed when we had the change of Prime Minister, and nothing has really come back on the table since, and that's not really acceptable. So that's my biggest gripe with the coalition, I must say.
Well, the climate change issue is obviously, for many of us, it's our biggest gripe with your opponent. And many would say that he's held his position for a very long time. He's got a very strong position still. There is still some support for him. So why
his position's changing.
Yeah, exactly. We know. What is the most important reason that we need a change from Tony?
Look, I think there's a number of reasons, and everyone comes to this movement and this feeling at this time for different reasons. I think anyone in business understands that the same, if you've been chair of the board or CEO of the organisation and you're demoted to executive, it's probably best to leave the organisation. It's rather hard for the organisation to continue being productive in that situation, and that's very much the situation you have with the Liberal Party, and I think that's why there were so many moves to try and get him to take on another role at the 2016 election. So I do think from a point of view of better dynamics and a sort of a better operation within the Liberal Party, he actually needs to go. But I think from Warringah's point of view, we need a new vision for Warringah. I mean, we've had the same thing over and over again. The campaign at the moment is targeted on smearing me. It's not actually a campaign based on what is the plan for the next 3 to 4 years. What are we going to do differently? What are we going to do better? Well, we do know there's fast track the tunnel, and I'm happy to talk about the tunnel. Sorry, was that?
Do not want the tunnel.
You don't want the tunnel. Well, but we'll talk about the tunnel. But the reality, we need something more positive. My kids look at me and they're just so disengaged with politics. whenever you ask people, and they talk about politicians and lawyers are the two least trusted professions. So I'm going to be across the wall. I think we're
it's not a profession.
Below that. So I think we have to do better. We have to be able to raise the bar. I mean, I've already published that I want to do. I want there to be a minimum of standard of truth in political advertising. We are a democracy. We're proud to be a democracy. This is something that we really means a lot, and yet it's misled. People are misled. We have no legislation that requires that advertising have any element of truth. Now, anyone here, you're all from the corporate and business world, we all know in our businesses you cannot publish anything that's misleading or deceptive, or you get caught for it. And yet at our highest level, where we're ultimately the highest decision of determining the future of our country and the legislation and who will be in government, you have completely free rein to lie. I find that completely unacceptable. The irony is neither major party is going to do anything about it because they take advantage of it when it suits them. We all saw the Medicare scare by Labor at the last election, and so clearly, but then the irony is for the coalition, they hated that campaign but they didn't do anything about it whilst in government. And unfortunately, the cynic in me says, well, because they like to use it when it's convenient. So I think then that brings back to the earlier question of what do the independents do? And I think the independents are we're going to push for the bar to be raised a little bit more.
And specifically to Warringah then, this is my last question to you. What are the key issues for us here?
Well, in all the surveys and studies, the key issue is climate change. So we have over 70% are focused on wanting a long-term plan. Now, there's a lot of misinformation. But the reality is the cheapest form of power is now renewables sourced by hydro. It is progressing at an amazing rate in terms of the developments. I think I'm not alone in saying when the budget was announced, there was no mention of innovation, no mention of positive and future and how are we going to progress things and grow our economy. Everything is worded in a negative way of how we're going to hold things back and keep things sort of strictly under control, and I think that's where we want more. So when I've been out and about around Warringah, everyone has generally said climate change. We actually want this to stop being a political football. We want government to get on with setting proper targets, get on with putting something in place that actually ensures a good future. And now, I'm a working mum. I'm not an expert on climate. I've spent a lot of time with experts in the last 2 months to be on top of it. But the reality is we need a credible, independent authority to set our strategy and our targets and make